Good morning. This is Claire Epstein from IndustrySafe, and welcome to the IndustrySafe TRA webinar on complying with PTASP. A couple of housekeeping rules or issues before we begin. You should see a PowerPoint slide that says IndustrySafe on it, as well as the GoToWebinar panel. Please use the GoToWebinar panel to ask any questions you have. There's a question feature there, and we will answer the questions as they come in. In addition, this webinar is being recorded, and you will be sent a recording after the webinar that you'll be able to relook at or share with others. So again, thank you everyone for attending. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Kogan from TRA, who's going to start out with the first half of this webinar.
Thanks very much, Claire. And let's just get that all squared away. There we go. So thank you very much. My name is Rob Kogan, and I'm with TRA. For more than 25 years, TRA has provided technical and management consulting service, transportation and transit system safety, regulatory compliance, operations, maintenance, capital investment programming, asset management, security, and emergency preparedness. TRA is one of the most trusted consulting firms in the U.S. transit industry. We've worked with transit agencies of all sizes throughout North America, and we also provide legal and policy expertise in public transit regulations and compliance. So our goals for this portion of the webinar are to familiarize you with 49 Code of Federal Regulations, or CFR Part 673, to learn more about Public Transportation Agency Safety Plans, or PTASPs, and how to create and implement them, and the requirements of Safety Management Systems, or SMS, as it relates to PTASPs. We'll also spend some time looking at what to consider when implementing your PTASP, as well as best practices that ensure your safety plan goes beyond the basic requirements to truly safeguard your agency's employees and customers. So to begin with, we'll look at what a PTASP is. So what exactly is a PTASP? It's a documented comprehensive safety plan used to facilitate the identification, management, and mitigation of safety risks using the principles of SMS. The Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, issued a new rule in July 2018 requiring most public transit agencies to have one. If your agency is affected by this new rule, you'll have until July 20th of 2020 to have a PTASP written and executed. So what is this new federal regulation that requires the PTASP? The rule for the PTASP is part of a law called 49 CFR Part 673. The Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, has determined that the rule will go into effect in July of this year, of 2019, with an additional one-year window for compliance. This means that affected transit agencies and states will have until July 20th, 2020 to have a compliant PTASP in place. The PTASP rule is part of the FTA's National Public Transportation Safety Program, as described in 49 CFR Part 670. Congress granted FTA the broad authority to require these safety programs at transit agencies throughout the country. So who exactly needs to have a compliant PTASP by July 2020? First, all rail transit agencies. This includes those rail transit systems not regulated by the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA, and are already subject to the State Safety Oversight Rule, or SSO rule, contained in 49 CFR Part 674. For such agencies, the PTASP will replace the existing System Safety Program Plan. Next, the PTASP rule applies to most, but not all, bus agencies. Bus agencies that are subject to Part 673 include all bus agencies that are recipients or subrecipients of urbanized area grant funds under Chapter 5307 that run more than 100 buses in peak revenue service. These agencies must write their own PTASP. For those bus systems that are part of a larger multimodal agency, such as one that has both rail and bus transit service, your agency can choose to develop either a single PTASP that covers both modes or separate PTASPs for each mode. Small bus transit providers, defined as those 5307 recipients that run 100 or fewer buses in peak revenue service, are required to have a PTASP and to implement it. They are not, however, required to write the PTASP themselves unless they opt to do so. States are required to write the PTASP for small transit providers who do not elect to write their own plans. States have an important role to play with their covered transit agencies with regard to safety management. States are already required to oversee rail transit agency safety through the State Safety Oversight Program, including auditing the implementation of the PTASP by covered rail transit agencies. But while states are required to write the PTASP for small transit providers, states are not responsible for implementing the PTASP at these agencies, nor are states responsible for ensuring the implementation of the PTASP. Instead, FTA, not each individual state, is responsible for ensuring that covered bus transit agencies, regardless of size, are implementing the safety programs described in the PTASP. So at TRA, our safety philosophy is that the goal of every transit provider should be more than just compliance with federal rules and regulations. The PTASP and accordingly SMS are about fundamentally improving the management of safety. Many transit agencies claim that safety is their #1 priority, but priorities change. It's important for transit agencies to consider safety not a state of being, but rather as a core value. Ultimately, think of safety as a process, a never-ending journey rather than a destination. Effective safety management will require accepting that there will always be safety risk, and that risk must be managed effectively and systematically. SMS also includes the concept of continuous improvement. In an organization such as a transit agency, there will always be room for improvement. So a PTASP has to have the following 5 elements. First, the signature of the accountable executive, as well as the approval of the transit agency's board of directors or the equivalent authority. Second, the PTASP needs to document in detail how the transit agency implements SMS. Third, the PTASP needs to have quantifiable safety performance targets in accordance with the FTA's National Public Transportation Safety Plan. Fourth, there must be a description of how the agency meets all the requirements set forth in 49 CFR Part 670, the National Public Transportation Safety Program. And fifth, a description of how the covered agency will review and update the PTASP annually. Covered rail transit agencies actually have a 6th requirement for an emergency preparedness and response program. So now that we've reviewed the requirements of a PTASP, we'll discuss safety management systems, or SMS. What exactly is SMS? It is a formal, top-down, organization-wide approach to managing safety risk and assuring the effectiveness of safety risk controls. SMS includes systematic procedures, practices, and policies to manage safety risk. SMS has been in use in the aviation industry for many years and is now being more widely adopted across the transportation industry. SMS is divided into 4 components or pillars. They are safety management policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion. So agencies and states can find more information about SMS and the science behind it on the FTA's website, and we provide a link here. The first SMS pillar, safety management policy, contains 3 requirements. Establish the necessary authorities, accountabilities, and responsibilities for implementing SMS. Include a process for employees to report safety conditions and establish protections for those employees, as well as a description of employee behavior that may result in disciplinary action. And then the final requirement, to communicate the policy throughout the organization. The second SMS pillar, safety risk management, contains 3 broad requirements. First, hazard identification. Transit agencies must establish a safety hazard identification process, including identifying hazards, hazard sources, and hazard consequences. These activities and methods that transit agencies use in the safety hazard identification process must apply system-wide, including not only day-to-day operations, but also organizational and state of good repair activities. Second, safety risk assessment. This is the process agencies use to evaluate safety risks and their consequences, and must include an evaluation of hazard probability and consequential severity. Using this assessment, agencies will then prioritize safety risks for mitigation or elimination. Third, the safety risk mitigation. This process describes how agencies will mitigate or eliminate safety risks, and agencies must establish criteria for which risks need to be mitigated. The third SMS pillar, safety assurance, contains 3 requirements: safety performance monitoring and measurement, management of change, and continuous improvement. The first, safety performance monitoring and measurement, aims to identify, collect, and analyze information from various sources throughout an agency's operations in order to monitor its SMS implementation and effectiveness. The second, management of change, includes identifying system changes which may introduce new hazards or impact safety performance and evaluating these changes using the safety risk management process. It applies to any changes, including physical, organizational, and operational changes. And the third is continuous improvement. So this activity drives an agency's regular review and assessment of its safety performance. One thing to note is that only safety management or safety performance monitoring and measurement is required of all covered transit providers. The second and third requirements are not required of small transit providers. The fourth SMS pillar, safety promotion, contains 2 main requirements: competencies and training and safety communication. The first, competencies and training, requires agencies to have a safety training program for all agency employees and contractors directly responsible for safety, including appropriate refresher training. Inherent in this process is the need for agencies to establish training requirements related to job functions responsible for safety. Agencies have flexibility in developing and tailoring their programs for employees directly responsible for safety, and may be able to use existing training programs so long as they comply with Part 673. Likewise, agencies must determine on their own which of their employees are directly responsible for safety. The second, safety communication, requires agencies to establish a process for communicating information related to safety and safety performance. At a minimum, this information must include hazards and safety risks related to employees and contractors' roles and responsibilities, as well as safety actions taken as a result of reports submitted through the Employee Safety Reporting Program. So you have a good understanding of the processes in place at your agency and have written the PTASP. Now comes what may be the hardest part, actually implementing the SMS program you've described in the PTASP. The PTASP is a living document and as such must be put into practice. Clearly, each agency is unique and will need to do different things to scale their SMS program appropriately. However, there are some common themes that will most likely apply to virtually every covered transit agency, regardless of size, including hazard identification, analysis, and mitigation, a key part of safety risk management, safety data collection. It's difficult to impossible to know what the risks are or whether what you're doing to promote safety is working if you don't collect good data. And safety performance monitoring. This is critical to being able to tell whether written plans, policies, and procedures are being implemented and if overall safety goals are being met. When implementing the PTASP, it's a good idea to examine best practices regarding SMS and putting an effective safety program into place. These include, but are not limited to, setting up a structure of safety committees at different levels of the organization, from executive through management and to the front line. Having such a committee structure in place will help ensure that safety issues are brought to the attention of appropriate departments and individuals. Setting quantifiable, measurable safety goals and objectives. Safety goals could include reducing customer and employee injuries and accidents, and improving operating rule compliance and maintenance compliance. To that end, Having a robust process to regularly audit and inspect safety-critical operations and maintenance functions can be one of the most effective ways to assess your overall culture of safety. If employees believe that the organization cares about their safety, they are more likely to care about safety too. In addition, as part of the concept of continuous improvement, agencies should continually use the data they collect to help identify safety risks and prioritize their mitigation or elimination. Finally, having a formalized process for tracking, monitoring, and verifying risk mitigation activities will help hold employees and managers accountable for safety performance and help demonstrate that the agency does not pay mere lip service to safety. Remember, the success of SMS depends on recognizing safety as a core value and aiming for continuous safety improvement. This requires abandoning the notion of safety as a state to achieve and adopting the idea that safety is an everyday ongoing process. So if you're interested in hearing more about public transportation agency safety plans, check out TRA's series of presentations. You can find all of them right at our website at traonline.com. So now that we've taken a closer look at what a PTASP is and how to integrate SMS into your agency safety program, let's turn it over to our friends at IndustrySafe and to Claire Epstein, who will talk about how safety management systems can assist you in complying with Part 673. So take it away, Claire.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rob. I'm just making myself a presenter here. Okay, great. Everyone should be able to see my screen. I'm going to talk about PTASP and safety data tools. Just a little bit of an introduction. IndustrySafe is headquartered in Philadelphia. We used to be part of TRA, but we are now a separate company that we created in 2018. But the IndustrySafe software has been around since 2004. We have over 450 clients who use our software in a wide range of verticals, but we're very familiar with transit. We have over 20 clients who are public transit agencies who use the software, and we're very familiar with the SMS approach. In addition to our public transit clients, we have clients in construction and in airports and in other transportation areas who have used SMS for a while. In terms of myself, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of IndustrySafe. I've worked closely with transit agencies and with our private sector clients on issues of safety data collection for a long time. I'm really responsible for the overall day-to-day operations of the IndustrySafe software group. In terms of PTASP and data, PTASP says that there's 4 safety performance targets you have to meet. Technically, the targets are in the National Safety Plan, but they are referenced in the PTASP rule. And those are fatalities, injuries, safety events, and system reliability. Each organization is responsible for setting their own targets within those areas, and the instruction is to look at both the total number of each item in the category and also the rate. So for fatalities, you would look at the total fatalities over a year, and then what that rate was per vehicle mile. Hopefully, folks won't have a lot of fatalities. But in terms of these 4 characteristics, these 4 targets: fatalities, injuries, safety events, system reliability, I think most organizations, be it bus or rail, are pretty comfortable with tracking fatalities and injuries. That's something folks have been doing for a long time, and hopefully there are not too many of them. The safety event is a much wider category. A lot of this is familiar with rail transit agencies, but if you're a bus agency, it's really, there's lots of events that could be considered safety events that you might not be tracking, or you might be tracking in your organization, but might not be tracked by the safety department. So that's something you might want to take a closer look at. And mean distance between failure, again, large transit agencies, I'm sure, are tracking this. Again, it's not done by the safety department. It's usually done over in the maintenance area. But certainly as part of PTASP, what organizations need to do is work closely amongst different silos within the organization. So safety needs safety data needs to talk to maintenance data and asset data and everything else. In terms of how IndustrySafe can help, IndustrySafe is a safety management software. We have lots of different modules, but in terms of the fatality, injury, incident investigation, event tracking, I would recommend our incident module. Our incident module allows our clients to put in any type of incident, whether it's a vehicle incident, an employee injury, a non-employee injury, and really takes you through risk factors, cause, analysis, incident investigation, detailed reports, provides automatic notifications, as well as the ability to link to corrective actions and hazards. So if there are organizations out there looking for a tool to handle some of this data collection, I would recommend our incident module for the pieces I just talked about. So, of course, the 4 pillars of SMS and of the PTASP, safety management policy, safety risk management, safety assurance, and safety promotion, they all have safety data elements associated with them. So I'm going to walk you through what are some of those data elements. For the safety management policy, the part that really concerns data is that this rule requires employees to report safety conditions to senior management. And there's lots of different, and they want to be able to do that without fear of reprisal, which often can mean anonymous reporting. So if folks are reporting safety data conditions, they want to look at the date and time and location, the type and risk of the safety condition. We have some tools that allow employees to directly report safety conditions without fear of reprisal. We have something we call public web forms. You can make those available to any of your stakeholders, and they can use that to report a hazard, a safety suggestion, any sort of safety concern, and they can also submit it anonymously. The next pillar is safety risk management, and that really deals with hazard identification, hazard risk mitigation, and here are some of the data points when you're looking at safety risks and hazards that you want to keep track of. Obviously, the date, time, location, description of the hazard, the severity and probability of the hazard, the risk mitigation and controls, and then, of course, any corrective actions. Again, for a lot of rail folks, this might be standard, but it might be newer to some of the bus folks. And again, the IndustrySafe software has a module specifically devoted to hazards, which allows organizations to identify hazards, to evaluate the hazards using a risk matrix that you can modify yourself, and also link to corrective actions, as well as to look at residual risk after you've mitigated the hazard. The next part, safety assurance, as Rob talked about, deals with safety performance monitoring, management of change, and continuous improvement. For safety performance monitoring in terms of data, you are looking at a lot of the key data points that I mentioned. You're going to look at your risk mitigation, that's your hazards, your event investigation, any safety concerns or any internal safety reporting systems that folks are giving with, that folks are providing you within your organization. And you're also going to look at compliance with procedures. The most common way organizations look at compliance with procedures is by reviewing audits and conducting inspections. And so with the IndustrySafe module, with the IndustrySafe software, we do have a module designed specifically to allow you to keep track of audits and inspections. So if you're reviewing, as a safety department, you're reviewing your contractors, or in an organization where you may have a lot of contractors doing work, you can use our audit and inspection module to make sure they're complying with procedures. It's pretty straightforward. It has checklists built in. You can use your own checklist, and you can easily track compliance that way. With our software as well, with both incidents and inspections, you can also conduct a lot of this work out in the field using our mobile app, which I know is important for safety professionals. You're always out. This can really help with that. Management of change. This is the idea that you're going to track the impact of change on hazards and safety performance. In terms of data tracking, there's a lot to it. We don't currently have a module in IndustrySafe to help folks keep track that focuses specifically on management of change, but it certainly lets you keep track of your hazards, safety performance, and so there are some ways to incorporate management of change into the IndustrySafe software. The next piece is continuous improvement. which is looking obviously at what goals you have, your performance indicators, and having a feedback loop. The IndustrySafe software does this in multiple ways, but one way I just wanted to pull out is our IndustrySafe dashboard. This lets you see your key safety performance indicators and monitor your progress over time, as well as it's easy to disseminate a lot of this dashboard information to other stakeholders in your organization. You can actually create your own performance metrics, safety performance metrics, and put them on the dashboard, and you can filter by location and time frame and individual, and it is all in real time. The next piece of the rule deals with safety promotion, and I think Rob did a good job of talking about this, the idea that you need to be able to communicate safety information to employees as well as have a comprehensive safety training program. There's lots of data points that go with safety promotion, and the piece I just wanted to mention is safety training. With the IndustrySafe module, we have a module specifically geared towards training. It does allow you to deliver, track, and schedule training. So you can develop for each individual or each group of individuals within your organization the required training profiles, so you can track to make sure that all of your employees have received the appropriate safety training and are up to date with that training. And there's lots of reports and notifications that help you keep track of that, as well as to keep your employees on track. So in terms of getting your safety data ready for PTASP, what are some next steps you have to take? So the first thing you want to look at is assess your current system of safety data. I'm sure almost every single organization out there is collecting safety data in some form or other. And so really the challenge is to look at what you have and to look at how you can improve it. It may require getting data from other departments, as I mentioned before. It making sure you understand how you're measuring the data and that those performance indicators and measurements are appropriate. And you do want to focus on all areas of the 4 SMS pillars. It is a lot of potential data. I do want to say that the final rule does not require organizations to use software to keep track of all this data requirements, but it's strongly suggested that it would be helpful in allowing organizations in helping them achieve SMS compliance. So with that pretty much concludes my portion of the presentation. There's a lot of information about the IndustrySafe software on our website at IndustrySafe.com. And there's also a blog article available on our website which talks specifically about the different needs and safety data points that came about from PTASP. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to questions. Does anyone, if you do have any questions, please just use the question panel, and we will answer questions as they come in. Okay, I see a question here. I'm just going to read it out loud for everyone. What assistance does the FDA have available to help transit agencies? Wow, that's a really good question. Rob, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, sure. In one of the slides in my part of the presentation, we had a link to the FTA's website, and incidentally, we'll provide access to the PowerPoint presentation on TRA's website at traonline.com. But basically, the FTA has created a couple of key guidance documents that they have made available on their website. One of those is actually a template for bus agencies to be able to use to create an agency safety plan. It's very basic checklist style template, but it's a useful document, and I would recommend that any agency that is looking for guidance definitely consult the FTA's website, because there are some very good resources there.
Okay, great. There's another question that came in, and the question is, do agencies have to be in compliance with 673 if they are already in compliance with 270 FRA regulated? Rob, do you want to tackle that?
So the agency safety plan requirement does not apply to FRA-covered railroads, including commuter railroads, Amtrak, and such. This only applies to bus agencies that receive the 5307 Urbanized Area Grant Funds, as well as rail transit agencies, which are not covered by the FRA.
Yeah, and the question and where it becomes tricky is when you have a multi-modal agency, which might operate FRA and FTA, then you really have to figure out, you really do need, I think, 2 separate plans for each, with maybe a way to connect the plans. The FRA and FTA don't make it easy for those multimodal agencies. Okay, the next question is, how do you see state safety oversight agencies assisting transit agencies with complying with PTASP? And again, Rob, I think this is a great one for you.
Sure. So state safety oversight agencies have a major role to play in assisting rail transit agencies. And I mentioned briefly that the SSO, for better or worse, does not really have a role to play with regard to bus agencies. But for rail transit agencies, the SSO is under Part 674 actually responsible for ensuring that the covered rail transit agency has a compliant PTASP. And so that would include both making sure that each year that document gets reviewed and updated and that it's compliant with Part 673, as well as periodically auditing the implementation of that document through audits and inspections. So there is a major role. In fact, you could say that the PTASP is sort of the backbone of the SMS program that the state safety oversight agencies are required to oversee, per se, at the rail transit agencies. Bus transit agencies, that's a different story. To the extent that most state safety oversight agencies are housed within state departments of transportation, then to the extent that that State Department of Transportation has a role to play in drafting PTASPs for small transit providers, there may be some available expertise from the folks on the SSO side of the house to provide to the folks who need to actually write those PTASPs for the small transit providers. However, the SSO will not have a role in auditing the implementation of those plans as part of their SSO responsibilities.
Okay, great. I have a couple other questions. The next one seems a bit IndustrySafe specific. And the question is it possible to further tailor the public incident form to make it more accessible for frontline employees? And so I guess the question with that is that's really on a case, and then there's a parenthetical, currently employees find navigating the entire location hierarchy too cumbersome. So that's something that we will have to work with you on a case-by-case basis. If you haven't worked specifically with a support analyst at IndustrySafe to configure the site and see what they can do to deal with that problem, I suggest you reach out to them because there are lots of configuration options with the IndustrySafe software to make the data entry easier. But I don't know how much time you've spent working with a support analyst and looking at our configuration tools. So I would definitely suggest trying that first, and then if you have any other issues and you're still having issues, then just reach out to me. Okay, the next question is, Rob, this looks like a good one for you. My agency has 96 buses. Do we need to comply with the PTASP regulation?
The quick answer is yes. So it's assuming that your agency receives 5307 grant funds, then if you have 96 buses, then you would fall under the category of a small transit provider. And that means that if you wanted to, you could develop your own PTASP for your agency. However, you could opt out and the state would be required to write that plan for you. But you would, in fact, once the state has written that plan, you would be held responsible by the FTA as a 5307 grantee for complying with the PTASP requirements.
Okay, great. There is another question. I'm not sure how I think it relates to something you just said, Rob. Is what about 5310 funding for small bus systems?
Right. I believe that the answer to that is if your agency relies solely on 5310 or 5311 funds, which are the Rural Transit Program and the Mobility for Seniors program. I apologize if I mangled that rule, but if your agency relies on those exclusively, then I think the way FCA put it is that the requirement is deferred. It's, maybe at some point in the future, FCA will come down and declare that 5310 and 5311 recipients have to comply with the requirement, but not at this time. On the other hand, if you receive any 5307 funds, even if you also receive 5310 or 5311 funds, you do need to comply with the PTASP requirement.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. There was another question. Are there any changes coming to IndustrySafe to better tailor the system to SMS and PTASP compliance? I love this question. I think that there is a lot that IndustrySafe already does that makes sure organizations can walk towards PTASP compliance. But I think what we're really looking for from our end is we're looking for our clients and organizations to tell us what they think would be the most helpful. Because it's one thing to read the regulations, but it's another thing to actually conduct the data and implement in practice. And so I think we need some real-life examples from our clients that say, hey, look, this is really something that we're planning to do with PTASP, and we need some help with IndustrySafe. We really want to listen to our clients and try to make the software as useful for them as possible. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. I don't see any other questions. Okay, I did see an example, but I'm going to take that offline, that question offline, because I'm not sure it's pertinent to the group. I will look at that separately. All right, I'm left. All right. Okay, final call for questions. All right, great. I don't see any more questions. Thank you, everyone, I've got a bunch of folks who are reaching out to me privately, but I don't see any additional questions for the group. With that, I'm going to conclude this webinar. Thank you, everyone, for attending, and we really appreciate all the feedback. This now concludes the webinar.